I'm Boone. This is Boone's Slot Car Garage, and tonight we're going to go ahead and do the second part of our water feature video. So our first video covered our stream. Our second video is going to cover a pond. So let's do this. So let's go ahead and get started on this pond. So if we look down here, we can see my trusted bulldozers right here, so we must be close. So what we've got is our stream that's coming here, and it's going to cascade into a waterfall, and I'm going to make a water feature as far as a pond right in this area. Now, at this point, what I've done is I went ahead and glued in all my polystyrene. So you can see that I just kind of chopped up different bits and just kind of glued them all together. And why I did it that way is so it's already starting different formations as far as the topography of the surface will have different levels. It won't be all flat. It'll, give a little bit more character. So at this point, we have this all glued in. We have the bottom glued in, the face to the waterfall, which we did when we put in our polystyrene for our stream. And what we're gonna do is it's gonna have an exposed side. So instead of just having a hole with some resin in it, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have this area exposed, so you'll be able to look into the actual pond itself. And we'll make sure we do something in there to liven it up a little bit. So now that we have this down, second part is we need to start slicing and dicing our polystyrene. If you see my other videos, I try to keep it fairly simple, but what we're gonna use is I have a little X-Acto knife, and I have just, it's like a paring knife, and I have my razor knife, and I have some 36 grit sandpaper, and I have my trusty wire brush. So the plan is that we're gonna have kind of a grassy knoll up on top, and then it's gonna come down, and we're gonna have a rock face in the actual pond itself. So what we need to do is go ahead and start with our rock face. And the reason why I'm doing that is so then when I make my grassy knoll, I can blend it into my rock. So let's start down here. And what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and use the razor knife, and we're just gonna go ahead and start slicing some V's in this. And you'll notice there's not much science to it. We're just kind of making it all rough. Now, I'm putting these back cuts into it, and I'm making like veins into the rock. So I'm gonna start out with those and then work into the others. So come in here, down into it. And I'm just gonna go ahead and make some up slashes like so. All right. Once you got a few in there, we'll grab our paring knife and we'll start chipping these guys out. And if we chip it out, it's already going to give it kind of a whole bunch of texture to it. See how that comes right out. So I'm going to go ahead and keep on doing this. And come back, we'll see where we're at. Okay, so we'll take a little bit of a break, see where we're at. Now you can see how I've done this down slashing and how it gives it kind of that kind of a cliff face type of look to it. Now, again, when you're doing this, you're gonna start accumulating a lot of stuff. So what I like to do is just go ahead and throw that into my bucket here, in my scraps, and hang on to it, because that's handy stuff there. We can use that in other parts. And we're actually going to use some with this as well. So you can see on how I've curved the corner here. And what I've done is just slashed into it and just keep on chipping away. So on this area, I actually built this out. And so what I want to do, I still have a wire in there. I need to get that out. But what we're going to do is we're going to carve this down a little bit. So let me get this wire out and pull that wire out. And the reason why I have this wire is that when I glued everything together, I use this to hold it into place. So now that it's in there good, we can go ahead and get that out of there. So when we come back, I'll have this out and we'll start shaping this side right here. Okay, so I went ahead and got the wire removed. Now we have this area that's out. So what I think I want to do is just kind of curve it down a little bit so it has a little bit of an outcropping here of a rock. So if I come down, I'm just going to shape this like so. So you notice I didn't go just with a straight line, kind of went with more of a natural form that's, you know, kind of curved. Because if you hit all geometry, you know, straight angles and stuff, I don't know, I don't think it kind of takes away from it. So at this point, we're going to still do our slashing technique. Just come down like so. Now this upper area, we went ahead and did that when I did the stream. So this area up in here is pretty much done. Now it has some resin on it, and with the razor knife, we can cut into our resin that's there if we need to roughen it back up. So just be careful when you're doing this because it is a little bit more of a harder surface to carve into. But we're just going to kind of hit this in the corners a little bit. Hit that like so. Let me get my paring knife out. And then we got to find it. There it is. So we just go like this. And we just take out some chunks. There. Cut this back. And then that'll kind of blend into our resin. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that a little bit more. Here's the base. Pull that down. Okay, and now let's go ahead and let's attack this a little bit more. And there we go. I'm just going to go hit it like so. And you notice I painted this side. It's okay. We can blend it in. So just kind of chip it out. All right, so I think we got our walls pretty much done here. I just got to wrap it around on this one side, and then we'll go ahead and attack the pond bottom. Okay, so we have this. We have our rock face all done here and on this side over here. Now we need to go ahead and attack the pond bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take some 36 grit, and I'm going to dig this out a little bit. We're going to sand it out. And why I'm going to do that is because I don't want my pond bottom to be flat. I want a little bit of contour to it. So in order to do that, I'm going to do it with sandpaper. Now, the reason why I'm not doing it with a knife or anything else is because I want to control it more. If I start gouging away at a knife, I might go too deep. So this takes a little bit more time, but it's going to get me down where I need to be in a controlled manner. So we're just going to go ahead and start sanding this down. And you can see it doesn't take much. So we're already digging a hole out of it. And that's that 36 grit paper. So just going to go ahead and dig this down some more. And I'll show you how this looks when we get down. And you can see how it's digging down through and it's blending into the back. So I'm going to go ahead and sand some more. When we come back, we'll see how it looks. All right, so we went ahead and we have this all dug out, and I sanded that all out with that 36. And you can see now how it just has the contour. We have little bowls set in here, and it looks a lot more natural. So at this point, we need to take our rock wall and blend it into the base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this X-Acto knife, And I'm just gonna kind of follow the veins that I made coming down. And we're just gonna follow those down in here. Just kind of chip it down. And like something like this that has kind of a ledge, well, you know, you might be able to just kind of chip it out down below, and it makes it look like it's a rock. So, you know, this part's kind of cool. You just kind of go on through and just kind of make your stuff as you go. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and blend this out, and you can see already in that back area right through there that you know, looks pretty good. So I'm going to keep on going around, blend this all the way in. When we come back, we'll go ahead and start attacking the top side. All right, so we went ahead and I have this all blended into the bottom. It's all the way around. Now let's go up on top. So in the previous video, I had the track up here and we put tape on it like you see right here. And why we do that is so we can carve this foam to the height of our track, so we have a good contour between the two. So being that I know that this is where I want it to be, what I'm going to do is I want this to come into my pond area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this back. Got to get this so it looks somewhat realistic. So in order to do that, we got to get rid of some of the sharpness of everything. So when I do stuff like this, I like to start on top and then kind of contour down into it. So I'm just going to cut through and get it like so. And the back side here, a little bit of a berm. Follow that down into it. Let's move that, and now I'm just going to go ahead and cut this down. And if you notice, I'm not cutting straight across again. I'm coming in at different contours. So just go like so. And there we go. And just kind of keep on working it down. Looks like in here we'll probably put a little bit of rock face in this area. But I'm just going to go ahead and keep on slicing that. And then once you get it all sliced, go ahead and take your 36 and we can sand it down into it. And then what this will do is just kind of soften our cut marks and make it look a lot more natural when it draws into it. So if we look on this one side right over here, where it comes down through, and then we have our rocks. So it just kind of blends into it. So I'm gonna keep on working this, and we come back, we'll see how it looks. Okay, so now we went ahead and I have everything blended into it. So you can see how this is gonna be a grassy knoll up here, and it's gonna go down, and then it comes right into our rock face. Same thing over here. It's gonna come down, we got a little bit of grass, and then we made a rock face right there as well. So, and it just blends on down through. Now, at this point, remember those chips that we had? So we have our magical bucket here. And if we look down at the bottom, we've got a bunch of these. So what we're gonna do before we go ahead and start putting our filler on is that I have some Mod Podge, and on this part, it doesn't really matter if you use gloss or if you use matte finish. So it helps if I take that off. And if I take that off, yeah, let's get that out of the way. So here we go. We've got our Mod Podge. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and lay some of this down in this area. And we're gonna take some of those chunks and we're gonna put on top of this. And then what that's gonna do is gonna give a some different boulders and whatnot down here on the lower portion. So let's see here. So I'll just go ahead and put that down. Put this off to the side, and then we'll come down below and grab some of these chunks. So we've got some pretty good sized chunks here. And what we need to do is just go ahead and take some of these and we'll just put it down in there. And what this is going to do is going to give the bottom here some texture. And since this also is going to be where our waterfall is going to be cascading down, we want some debris and we want some rocks down here at the base of it. So kind of makes it look like we had some rocks come over the waterfall at one point. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of put these around in here, and then I'm going to add some more and just kind of lay it all through. And also what this is going to do is, if you concentrate in the area where your seams are at, if you have different pieces of polystyrene, this is going to help seal that. So this will seal it, so when you do a resin pour, it'll help as far as not allowing it to seep through. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and do this, and when we come back after this all dries, we'll see how it looks. Take a look at what we did. So we've got our rocks down here, and they're all glued in with that Mod Podge. Now, as Mod Podge dries, it'll clear up. So some of these areas are still a little bit soft, and I've been hitting it with a hair dryer and stuff throughout the day, and it's dried up quite a bit, to the point where I feel confident that I can go ahead and go with the second step now. So what we need to do at this point is we're going to go ahead and use our trusty joint compound, and this is just drywall joint compound. And if you see my other videos, you'll see that I love to spread this stuff around on top of my polystyrene. So pretty much I just have two different size brushes here, a bigger one and a little small one for details. So let's go ahead and we'll pop this stuff open, put the lid down there, get that out of my way. And real simple, we're just going to take some of this and we're going to go ahead and just start putting it on. Now we can load this up, and if we have some areas that are loose, that's okay, because we can just put them into place. But what we're going to do is go ahead and spread this through, and we're going to fill up all the different little voids and whatnot, and get our get the top all sealed in. So with this bigger brush, I just go ahead and just load it in, and as it comes down into our areas here where our rock wall is at, I'm just going to go ahead and roll that and then blend it out. So we get it right down through here. Just keep on working that down in. Now remember, we're going to do that grassy knoll coming over, so we want a little bit of ground here right on the edge and then drop into our rock. So we don't want to use too much filler in there. So when it comes down to our actually rock work, I'm going to go ahead and put this big glop in there with the big brush. Yeah, let's see here, get that in there. Spread it around a little bit and get a little bit more on this corner. Get this. Now, don't worry too much if it starts filling it up quite a ways, because we'll go ahead and use our smaller brush now for our detail, and we'll just kind of work it through. So those areas that we did those cuts, we're going to kind of clean it out and just bring that definition out. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for a while. It's going to take a little while. And when we come back, we'll go ahead and work on putting a little bit more texture into things. So now we have our joint compound all laid down. And what we need to do now is come back in and give it a little bit of texture here and there. So if we look over here, I've given this a little bit of texture by hitting it with the top of the brush. Now this area over here I haven't done that to, and see how it's all kind of smooth. Now if we want to make this outcropping here look more like stone up along this edge, to get rid of those brush marks, if you take your brush and just dab it in there with a stiff brush, it'll stand it up as far as the compound, and it will give it kind of a rough texture. So then when we come in and hit it with our brush effect and our dry brush with the white, it has something to cling to at the top to give it some definition. So on these rock faces that go down, I just like to kind of like something like that that's smooth. I might actually kind of bring it down like this to kind of give a little bit of vein as far as in the rock. But when it comes down to like these areas that are broken off, I like to hit it just a little bit like that, just roughen it up just a little bit. And you want to do this when the compound is sat for a while. So it's kind of started to dry and it's not as wet, so that it'll take shape and you can manipulate the texture of it a lot easier. So if we just go in like so and hit some of these areas, and you'll see them. I mean, you'll see areas that are in here where you have brush marks, and if you want to get rid of those, just go ahead and hit it like so. And you can see as I hit this, how it is kind of standing everything up on end. So I'll go ahead and hit this wall, hit a couple of the stones down here at the bottom, and then we just need to go ahead and let this dry, and we'll take it to the next step. Now we have all our joint compound on, and it's all nice and dry, so our next step is to go ahead and paint. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to use a wash process, and if you see my other videos, you'll know that I do a wash process on probably 98.9% of everything that I do. And the reason for that is that with a wash, it's watered down and actually will creep into all your little nooks and crannies real well. Plus, as it dries, it'll give it an uneven color to it. So you'll have areas a little bit darker and some areas a little bit lighter, and it just makes it look a lot more realistic. So how we're going to go ahead and attack this is that I'm going to go ahead and do my rock first. And the reason why I'm doing my rock first and not my ground cover is because my ground cover is a darker color and my rock is a lighter color. And how that will work is that I can get, if I get my rock color and it's over the top of certain areas per se where I'm going to have my ground cover, it's much easier to coat the ground cover to hide the gray that I'm going to put down. Now, if you've seen the others, you'll recognize this whole entire process, and I'll go through it again just in case. And what this is a mixture that I come up with. It's with acrylic paint, and acrylic is water based, so I water down my paint with water to go ahead and thin it all out. And the mixing ratio with this is more like probably around 4 parts water to 1 part paint. And what we're gonna do is I'll just go ahead and get this on here. Now the color that I'm using, this gray, is kind of a mix between a white and a strong black, and I throw a little bit of blue in there and a couple other colors just so it dirties it up some. We don't want to have just a straight gray. You know, if you ever look at stone a lot of times will have a certain hue to the underlining gray color. So with this, I kind of go with a little bit of a bluish tinge in the gray. So what I'm going to do is real simply is take a bigger brush, and we're just going to go ahead and start coating this down in here. And you'll see how the wash will actually run down and get into all our little nooks and crannies. So it's just a matter of getting this all put on and work it around. And get it all covered. So I'm going to go ahead and work all my stonework, all the rocks, and when we come back, we'll go ahead and start attacking our ground cover. Well, there we go. Now we have our gray wash on all our rock. Now the next step from this is we're going to go ahead and paint the brown on all of these areas that is going to have our static grass and whatnot, as far as the grassy knoll and whatnot. And the reason why we put the brown down is so that when you do put the grass, you aren't looking down to white soil. We want our soil to be brown. So what I have is a brown wash, and it's mixed up pretty much the same way as the gray, which is about a 4-to-1 mixture using acrylic. And we water this down with water. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get this brown wash down, and we'll see how it covers these areas of the gray. And so here, let's give this a whirl. I got my brush here, and we're just going to go ahead and work this down. Now in certain areas I went ahead and did little blotches of some of the areas here that were standing out, and so we have a little bit of stone or whatnot that's going to peep through our grass. So here we go on the edge, and I'm going to use a smaller brush now, and this was down at the bottom, so it's actually a little bit more condensed as far as the brown goes, and that's okay because that'll just kind of show different types of soil. And at this point, it's just a matter of getting everything down there and covered, and it doesn't have to be perfect. See, that's the thing, because if it's going to look natural, it's going to have different colors and stuff that are going to be are in your soil. So different types of dirt and whatnot. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and put this right over the edge like so, and let it seep in onto it. And if you look here, you can see how it's actually going down into it, and it's softening that edge. So if we just kind of go like so, we can get that to just kind of penetrate down in there. It looks pretty good. So just kind of keep this going, and I'm just working this edge. And with this wash, what it's doing, it's able to penetrate down into our other colors. So if we go like that, it'll just naturally blend itself. Works out pretty good. Now, say we have an outcropping right here of some stone. Well, we need a little bit of dirt on that. So let's just go ahead and take some of this stuff. Let's put it in there and get that thinned out a little bit more. There we go. You can kind of work this in. Now I got that a little bit too brown, so no worries. We can always take our gray that we started out with, and I have a smaller brush here. Let me get this down just a little bit. What we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and hit that just on the edge right here. Let that kind of do its magic. And just kind of work it as such. I mean, you might have some areas in here that you want to have a little bit of dirt on. So any area that you have maybe a flatness to the rock, a ledge, just hit it with a little bit of brown, and it makes it look like some soil came down onto it. So I'm going to keep on doing this, and when we come back, we'll see how I did. Now we have our brown, our ground cover all put in. And next step I want to do is go ahead and take a couple different colors. And what I have here is like a sage green and a straw yellow. And what I'm going to do with these two, and they're acrylic, is that we're going to take some of these areas and just highlight it with just a little bit of color. It's going to break the monotony of things, and it's going to just give a little bit more life to our rock. So I'm going to go ahead and grab just a little bit of this sage green, and I have a small tip brush. And what we're going to do is just go ahead and pick out some of these stones and just add a little bit of color to it. Now, that's pretty powerful, and it pops quite a bit against that backdrop, but just kind of stay with me here real quick. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pick out a few right now, and I'm going to go just like that. Do a couple more, maybe right down in here. Now, when it's there, go ahead and take a black wash. Let me get that out of here. Take a black wash, and this is a black that I've made up, and it's very thin down, okay? So almost like I believe it's like almost like a 50-to-1. And what we're going to do with this is I'm just going to kind of come over the top, and what this is going to do is going to tone down the color some, but it's still going to give just a little bit of contrasting color to it. And as this dries, it'll just kind of bring out a little bit more color in our stonework. So next color I'm going to use is that straw yellow, and again the same type of effect. Let me grab a little bit more over here. What we're going to do here is again, you can see just how that really is bright, but again, stay with me on this, and we'll just kind of hit some stones here and there. And you can drape this, kind of dry brush a little bit, you know, say on this stuff up here. Just give a little bit there. And again, we'll come in with our wash. Make sure this is nice and cleaned out. And we'll just go ahead and hit this just lightly. And it'll just give it a little bit of color. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight some stones. When we come back, then we'll go ahead and take this black wash and we'll hit all these little veins and stuff. So now we've gone ahead and hit our colors in our rocks, and you can kind of see how it's making certain areas of this just kind of pop a little bit. Now we need to do is go ahead and take our black wash, and what we're going to do with this is these areas that are inside, our little crevices, some of these veins that we went ahead and carved in, we're going to go ahead and take some of this, and we're just going to put it right down in there. And what this is going to do is help give it a little bit more definition, and it's just going to give that your rock effect just a little bit more depth. So I'm just going to kind of work it through certain areas here, and as this dries, it'll start to take shape. Right now it kind of looks all kind of muddy and it's all going together. Well, Don't worry, it'll all start to take shape once it dries out. You get up in the morning, you'll look at this and go, wow, that looks really cool. So I'm just going to go through here and just kind of hit certain areas just to give a little bit more definition. I'm going to make sure that I get down here at the base of our pond as well, down in this area. So we're going to kind of get down in some of these shallows in between our stonework that was down in here. And that's going to give it a little bit more depth. So just kind of work it around. So go ahead and do that. When we come back, we'll see how we did. Now we have our gray and our black wash all dried up. So at this point in time, what we need to do is come in and do our highlights on our rocks. So what I like to use is an acrylic off-white, and this is an oyster white, which is kind of a dirty white. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do some dry brushing. So what I like to do is just go ahead and get some of this white put onto a board that I can work into it, and then I'll work it off to the side so my brush is fairly dry. Okay, we don't want a bunch of color on there. So what we're going to do is just do a little bit of a highlight dry brush on some of these outer areas of our rocks, and it'll give it a lot of definition. So we'll just come in and just slightly start hitting this just on the surfaces, and what this will do is bring out all that texture that we put in there for our rocks. And you know, it works really cool. So you bring it on down and just work it through, and a little bit of paint goes a long way. So just kind of put it on there, work it around. As the brush gets drier, you can put a little bit more force into it, and we'll go down like that. Now also down here on the bottom of our pond bed, we have all those rocks, so we want to make sure that we hit these too. And I got that. Need to work it just a little bit more. And if we do this, you know, it's amazing how this stuff just starts to pop right out. So kind of hit those upper angles, and especially down here on our pond, since we're going to be able to look into it. If we left it with no highlights, it's not going to show as well. We need to have that white in there so that we see that definition when we're looking through the resin. So just go ahead and lightly hit this over the top. So what I'll do is I'll keep on going with this. When we get all done, we'll see what it looks like. So there we go. We have our highlights done on our rocks, and you can see how now we've got all this definition. You can really start seeing how our rocks are turning out. So the next step I want to go ahead and do is I want to go ahead and put some sand down here on the base. Now, what I'm using is just regular beach sand, and you could use play box sand, or you know, there's all sorts of different sands that are out there. So what I'm going to use is just some regular beach sand, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and sprinkle this down in. Now I have myself a little brush, and the reason why I have a little brush is that when we sprinkle this down in here, I'll show you just a little bit. So we're going to bring some of this down, and that's going to give kind of a bottom to our pond, the base of the pond. So now with my brush, I want to come in and move this sand around and get it into all these little nooks and crannies, and also clean it off some of our rocks. So that way we can see everything that we've done down in here, and we just want to move it around and get it kind of all evenly spread out. Now if you got too much sand in there, you could take a vacuum it back out, and give it another shot. So there's always ways that you can go back on your work on a lot of this different scenery. So again, if the painting process, say you got too much white on it, it's okay. Just go back through the steps, go ahead and start with your gray, put your gray down, and just work it back out. And you can blend it in, and it'll all turn out great. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and spread this little bit of sand around in here. And once we get it where I'm happy with how it looks, I'm not covering up too many rocks, get it off some of this stuff. You got to remember, we're going to have a waterfall coming down, so we got to make sure that we see some stuff in here. Once we get it like that, now what we want to do is we'll go ahead and take some alcohol. And this is just IPA alcohol. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to spray it over the top of our sand. And this is going to allow our PVA glue that we're going to spray on it to penetrate down through and secure all the sand we put down. So let's just go ahead and give this thing a little douche of some alcohol. And now, once we have that, we're going to go ahead and take some watered down PVA. And this is another just little spray bottle. And we are going to spray this down and get this, come on, get this all down in here. And this PVA will go ahead and dry clear. And once that all dries, it'll secure our sand into place. So then when we pour it with the resin, it won't get sand into our resin. It'll stay all secured down at the base. So we go ahead and do that. I need to go ahead and let that dry before we can start our next step. Okay, so one little thing we can do while this is drying is, while it's still a little bit wet, we actually can come in with a little bit more sand. And what I'm going to do is just lightly do this right over the top. And this will just give a little bit more highlight. Just a little bit. You see, I'm not using very much at all. Just sparingly put it on. And what this will do is just give a little bit of definition, just a little bit more. And if it gets on some of our rocks, we still can just kind of take this brush, kind of move it around a little bit, and just give it that little extra bit of push to make it look a little bit more realistic. And the nice thing about that is, since our PVA is still a little bit wet, this will just seep right on top, and you can see how it's giving us a little bit of a blotchiness down here. So it's breaking it up. It's just kind of giving a little bit more definition. So every little bit that we do just adds that little extra bit. So once this all dries, what we can do at this point, and if we have any that's loose, come in with a small vacuum, just vacuum real lightly over the top, and whatever is loose sitting on the surface, we can go ahead and suck that up. So just a little bit of cleanup after that's put on, and voila, we have the bottom of our pond. So I'm going to go ahead and let this all dry, step away from it for a while, and when we come back, we'll take it to the next step. So now we have our sand down, and it's all nice and dry. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and add some greenery to this guy, because I don't want it to look just all sparse. We got to liven it up with a little bit of color. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to use some Mod Podge, and actually I'm going to use the gloss Mod Podge for down here on the lower. And we're just going to dab some stuff in here, use a little bit of coarse turf and some fine turf, and we're going to add a little bit of greenery around the edge, kind of look like a little bit of moss that's on some of our rocks and whatnot. And So when we come back, let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and take some of this Mod Podge and take the lid off of it. Put that over here. And what I'm going to do is with this gloss Mod Podge, I'm just going to go ahead and hit it just every once in a while on some of these stones. See, there's a little bit of a ledge right there. Go ahead and hit that. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of color down here on that. It has a little bit of greenery, a little bit of growth down on these little areas, just to kind of give a little bit more life. So I'm just dabbing it around and kind of making it sparse. Okay, so now that we got that, now let's go ahead and I will grab some, let's see here. Let's start out with some burnt grass, and this is Woodland Scenic's burnt grass. And all I'm going to do is just take a little pinch. I can get a pinch out, so a little pinch of it, and what we're going to do is just kind of put it on some of these areas. Now, the stuff that's left over that runs off of our areas a little bit, it's not too much of an issue because we can always come back with the vacuum and clean up those areas. What we're going to do is just add a little bit of this here and there. And now I want to go ahead and bring in a little bit of a lighter color. And I'm going to use some coarse green or coarse turf, medium green. And what we're going to do here is just add that to it. So, and what this is going to do is going to make it look, it has a little bit of vegetation at the bottom of our pool. Since the side this, we're going to be looking straight into it, so we want to be able to make it look like it has a little bit of plant life down here at the bottom. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some of this around. It'll get off my finger. And it's just gonna add that little bit of extra push for our stuff here. And when we put the resin in this, we just need to be careful that we don't disturb that. So we're gonna have to be a little bit extra cautious when we do our pour. So I'm gonna keep on adding a little bit more in here. I'm pretty much gonna use different types of greens, of coarse turf and fine turf. And we'll see how it looks when we come back. Okay, so now I went ahead and got a little bit more in there. When it was some light green coarse turf and some of this medium green and a little bit of weeds. Now that we have the base down here, as far as the pond floor pretty much squared away with at this stage, we want to go ahead and we want to move up on our back wall. Now, you got to take in consideration as far as where your water line is going to be. And my water line is going to be right around this area, right in here. So why I say that is that anything above that water line, if we're going to use any type of PVA glue to put down, I want to use a matte finish so that, you know, once it's on there, it's not going to be glossy. It's going to have a matte finish. So as far as this back wall is going to go, I'm just going to use straight Mod Podge, but the matte finish. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this trusty stuff right here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead in some of these flat areas that are in here. And what I want to do is get a little bit of greenery in those areas just to make sure, you know, it just kind of completes it. And then the other thing is that, you know, that's where our moss is going to grow up, and our different vegetation in our water is going to be on those areas where it can actually grab hold and start to root. So what I want to do is go ahead and take this Mod Podge, and I'm just going to go ahead and add some right in these kind of ledge areas. And just kind of grab it like so. And just put it in there. You'll have little pockets that you can go ahead and put this stuff on. And it'll show where it's, you know, where it's at. And what this will do is just give us a little bit more oomph, you know, a little bit more depth, a little bit more definition as far as our back wall goes. So now that I have that, what I'm going to use for this is some of the flocking that I made in a previous video. And this is the green flock. We made brown in that one video, but again, the green is pretty easy just to make. You just add green paint instead of brown paint. So I'm using a little bit of a stick, and why I'm doing that, so I can put it right up here on the edge, and then I can just push that right down in there. And this helps, you know, if you try to just pinch it and you know, put it in there, I found that using a stick or a popsicle stick or whatnot makes this a lot easier to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and whatever spills down is okay, because what we're going to do is we'll come back with our vacuum and we'll take care of that little bit of spillage down there. And so I'm just going to go around here and hit these areas like so. And we come back, I'm just going to work my way up to the top up here with some of our moss and whatnot for this back wall. And we'll keep on adding to it. So at this point, I went ahead and I have that all that flocking that we made all on our wall. And if we zoom in on this, you can see how that looks. So down here at the base, you can see how it's accumulated quite a bit. So at this point, now what I want to do is just go ahead and pat this down so it gets on there. And I like to take an old brush and just sit here and kind of work it down into that Mod Podge. And again, don't worry about the stuff that's falling down, because we're going to go ahead and vacuum that all up. But just kind of go around your areas, kind of tap it in there. And what this will do is work our flocking into our PVA glue. So once we get that all done, what I'm going to do now is come in and I'll just vacuum the base out one last time. And when we come back, we'll go ahead and start adding some plants. Okay, so I went ahead and vacuumed it all out. Now, for just a little bit added insurance, I want to make sure that this is all secured down. So I don't want to go ahead and make my pour and then some of this stuff starting to drift up into the resin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just coat this whole entire area with some acrylic sealer. And this is the type of sealer a lot of times they'll use on dried plants or whatever. And what this will do is it's kind of like ultra hold hairspray on steroids. You can use hairspray. Hairspray would work too. It would just kind of hold everything into place. But I'm going to go ahead and hit it with this. And it's just an aerosol. And what we want to do is just give it a light coat. And you can already see, I don't know if you can see on that, but there are some of this that is blowing around. So in order to alleviate that, let's just go ahead and let's hit it with some of this stuff right here. And that'll just kind of hold it down, and it'll make us sleep better at night knowing that everything's gonna stay in place. So there we go. So now we have that all in there. I'm gonna let that dry. Then we come back. Let's go ahead and we'll put some little shrubs and stuff in here. So yeah, that'll look good. Well, I went ahead and started looking at it, and I thought, you know, I think we need some limbs down here. So I went ahead and I found myself some gnarly looking sticks. And a lot of times at the bottom of a lake or a pond, we'll have wood down here. So let's go ahead and get our handy dandy Mod Podge out, And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and glue some of this into place. I'm just going to find it as such and just set it down in here. And that'll just kind of give a little bit more character to the bottom of our pond. Let's see here, that sits there. So let me go ahead and I'll glue this guy in. Get some glue. I'll just go ahead and drape it on here, just so he stays in place. And there we go. So now we have ourselves some old limbs down in here as well. So yeah, that looks pretty cool. So old gnarly looking pieces of wood. Now as far as our plant life goes, what I like to use is just natural moss. Now you can go out and buy moss at a hobby store or a craft store. This stuff comes right off the trees right here in my neighborhood. So I got a couple different styles. And a lot of times if you go out hunting around, you can find this type of stuff. Now, the reason why I'm using moss is if you've ever looked, paid attention to the plant life that is under the water, especially in fresh water, yeah, it has some real kind of weird texture to it. And I found that moss is, it's a natural source, and it kind of has that same type of wiry look to it. So what I'm going to do, let's get rid of this one, is I'm just going to take little bits of this. So we'll just take that, we're going to tear it off and get it like so. So like that. And then we'll grab some Mod Podge here, and we're just going to go ahead and dab it right down as such, and then take our moss, and we're just going to go ahead and plant it right in here. And let's just kind of break up the bottom a little bit, make it look like, make it look like a real lake bottom. So nice thing about the moss a lot of times is that it's all together. But for safety, I'm going to go ahead and coat it again with that acrylic once I get a few different things planted in. So I'm going to go ahead and use some more of that and some of this stuff. And when we come back, we'll see how it's looking. Well, cool. So now at this point, we have our moss in there, and you can see how the texture just kind of looks like those plants that are under the water. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and take some more of this sealer and just kind of spray it over the top, just to make sure that these fibers stay sticky and they stay together. So just go ahead and give this a shake, kind of hit those areas a little bit, each one of these little plants, like so. And we'll let that sit and dry up, and we're ready for our next step. Cool. Now everything's dry, so what we want to do now is I want to go ahead and add a little bit more to it, some little props. So what I found with my 3D printer is that I found some fish. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add some little fish. Now, these printed out black, you can see on the back side, they're only one-sided. Now they do have some that are three-dimensional, but I went ahead and chose these because I was just going to go ahead and keep them, you can't really see it from the other side per se. So what you can do is go ahead and print out some little fish, or you might be able to find some at, per se, a hobby shop or maybe a craft store. A lot of times in the modeling areas, they have different little fish. So this is a 3D printed file, and it was actually much bigger. I was able to go ahead and size it down and scale it down, and it'll work pretty good here. We're just gonna go ahead and put some fish in here. So one of the ways that you can do this is if you wanted a fish to be like floating up high, right? What you could do is go ahead and take some of the clear resin and put it out on some wax paper and then lay this fish onto it, and what would happen is it would go ahead and make a stake for it. And the stake, being out of the resin, would blend in to the resin that's around it, so it would appear that the fish was just swimming all by itself up here. Now, being that we're gonna have the waterfall and everything else, a lot of times the trout, whatnot, will go ahead and they'll be down a little bit lower. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and take these guys and a little bit of super glue, and where we have some of this plant life and whatnot, I'm just going to go ahead and take some super glue, and we're just going to put a little dab up onto it like so, and then take our fish, and then we're just going to go ahead and rest him right in here, and hopefully he'll stay there. So let's see here. Just get him to stay in place. Might have to wait for the super glue to set up a little bit more in order to get him to stay there. Looks like he's going downhill. So I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna play with my fish and get him placed right. When we come back, we'll see what we got. Well, there we go. We've got fish. So if you look in here, you can see the few that are in there, and that's going to be pretty cool because our water level will be about so high through here, and it'll just give that little extra bit of realism to our pond slash lake slash, I don't know. It's going to have resin in it, so it's going to be some type of water feature. So we could stop at this point, but I've got one more thing up my sleeve, and one of the things that I want to do is that, being that this is going to be cut out on one side and not the other, it was going to be dark. So in order to lighten it up, I came up with an idea that we're going to go ahead and take a submerged car, something that's been in a wreck, and we're going to have a wreck scene right in this area. So we come back, I'm going to go ahead and show you the car that I came up with. All right, so here we go. Here's the car that I came up with that we're going to go ahead and put in our pond. Now, this is it's a 3D printed body shell that is a free print. You can get it off of a search site called Thingiverse. And if you look up Ferrari slot car bodies, this guy comes up. So what I've got here is, obviously it didn't come out like this. So in order to create the damage and whatnot, I took a heat gun, heated it up, and then just went ahead and worked it in the front and created damage to it. One of the reasons that you want to go ahead and use like a heat gun for something like this is that if you use a torch, it's going to burn it. A heat gun is going to go ahead and disperse the heat evenly in the area that you want to manipulate, so that way when you push on it, it'll be a little bit more realistic. It'll just go ahead and fold itself together. So what I've done is went ahead and imprinted this out, and then went ahead and inflicted damage on it as far as the body. You can see on the front end how it has the gouges on it, and how we kind of buckled the side and whatnot. All these different pieces that are on it were pretty much 3D printed as far as the wheels and tires, the shell, the interior and stuff was hand built, and that was pretty much just creating seats and some seat belts in the inside with the steering wheel, and the cockpit shell itself is just made out of sheet aluminum. Now you'll notice there's straws on the bottom of this. You're probably going, Boone, why do you got straws on the bottom of your car? Well, the straws are for lights. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and set this in, and these straws are going to go ahead and go through the wall. And the reason why I did that is because, first off, I'm not quite ready yet to go ahead and set up the electronics into my layout as far as my the lights and everything else. And what I've been doing is just kind of doing some little odds and ends, you know, with a battery pack. And this way, this allows me that later on, when I decide that I'm gonna go ahead and wire everything in, I can go ahead and do LEDs and string them through this up into the areas where the lights are gonna be. Now, this has tail lights and it has headlights. So when we have this in the water, we'll have lights on and it'll illuminate down through, which will go ahead and shed a lot of light on all the scenery we've done inside our pond. Now, the weathering and stuff, I just did a video on weathering, pretty much the same way that I went ahead and did that video as far as weathering, the way we did this car. You'll do notice there's some blue. There's a little bit of blue, that turquoise. And what that is that this hill is going to have the double rail guardrail that is went ahead and did a video on, and it's painted blue. And so we're gonna have some wrecked guardrail where this car came crashing through, and that blue is gonna be that transfer from the guardrail onto the car. But I need to get this on first because it's going in resin and I won't be able to go ahead and paint that if it's inside. So there's why the blue's on it. Now, if we keep on looking at the underside of this, this is just regular drinking straws. And the straws themselves are those corrugated ones that, you know, you can go ahead and hook the end of it. So I use those so I can go ahead and make a pocket on the back side of where these headlights and stuff are at, and then epoxy these down in. And then that way they're in there, they're not gonna come out. Plus the other thing is that when the front end of this is submerged into the resin, we won't worry about resin creeping into our straws. It's all sealed up, so our lights will be safe. The other thing on the outside of this is that if you notice, there's really no headlight covers. And what I did for that is I went ahead and took some clear Mod Podge, the gloss Mod Podge, and I just went ahead and loaded this all up. Okay, I loaded it all up with Mod Podge, and as it dries, it clears up. You know, it clears up just crystal clear. Now, in order to make the divot so that I could put the light in the inside, I just took a little piece of wood, put it in there with a little bit of like Vaseline on the end of it, so the glue would not stick to the wood. And so when this set up enough, I went ahead and removed those pieces of wood, so now there's a little pocket on either side where the headlights are at. If we go around to the back side of it, we have tail lights as well. Those will go ahead and illuminate. And what these guys are, the little rhinestones that you can get at a arts and crafts. The one thing with them is that they're clear plastic, but they use an aluminum foil on the back side of these. And what you need to do is just go ahead and clean that aluminum foil off so that it's just bare red plastic, and then just go ahead and glue them into place. So that's what I did there. And then again, epoxied them in. So let's go over to our pond area and I'll show you where this guy's gonna go. Okay, so we got our fish. So our fish are all in. And you know, they look pretty good. They're swimming around. Now, remember, we're gonna have our water level about yay high through here, okay? So our fish, they're gonna be good. They're gonna be in the water. And now we get back to our car. So this car is gonna be down in this corner. And with the lights on, it will go ahead and illuminate the inside of our pond area. Now, let's get back to the straw idea. And you're probably going, why would he put straws? Okay, I understand. Well, this was my thought. If I went ahead and I built all this and I went ahead and put the LEDs and just string the small wires and popped a little hole for the wires in here, would it be easier? Yes, it would be a lot easier to do that. But let me paint a scenario. So say we go ahead and do that and we get them all rigged up and we pop our hole and we get it back in there and we didn't put straws on it. And say a week, 2 weeks, maybe 6 months or a year go by, and something happens to those LEDs. One of our headlights burns out, or our tail light burns out. Well, we have no way now of going in and repairing the problem. And you know, it would be one thing if it was a little diorama that we were building, but we're building something that's going to be around a little time. You know, this layout is going to be a part of my life for quite a while, or unless I sell it, but then it's going to be somebody else's. And the last thing that we want to do is have something that we've put effort into that we can't repair. So that's kind of the idea of the straws. The idea of the straws is that if a light burns out, we can always replace it. It just becomes repairable. So it's a little added insurance. Does it create more work? Yes. But in the long run, I think it's a little bit safer bet. Now, if you notice, if we put this in, what we're going to have to do is cut the hole down in this area. So what I'm going to need to do is go ahead and cut this hole, slide these through, and then at that point we can go ahead and get our LED lights in there. So when we come back, I'm going to go ahead and have my hole cut, and we'll go ahead and get our car mounted in where it needs to be. So I went ahead and I cut my hole right back in here. Let me go ahead and pull these straws out. You can see the hole that I cut. So there's a hole right back here in the corner. Now it's going to be right real close to our water line. So what I'm going to need to do is, after I get this all done, I'm going to go ahead and take some hot glue from the back side and seal it up so that we don't get any leaks as far as our resin to come out. So at this point, what the plan is we go ahead and we take this and string it through, and we can go ahead and get this car to just line right up. Get it right up in there like so. So let me get just the angle right. Make sure everything's down on there. And there we go. So now our car is in its resting place. So if we take a look at this, bring it over, you can see how down in the front, how it's going to go ahead and rest right there at the bottom of the pool. And if we come over to the side, you can see that you're not seeing that hole, because it is pretty much hidden on the back side over there. Even if we go in like this and we zoom in, you're not going to see that down inside there. So works pretty good. So now what we need to do is I need to go ahead and climb underneath this with some hot glue and get that all sealed up. So let me go ahead and do that, and when we come back, let's start stringing some lights. Now it's ready for the lights. So the lights I'm going to use on this are these little battery string lights, and you can pick these up at a craft store. Heck, I've even seen them at the supermarket sometimes. And they're just a little string light with LEDs. So let me go ahead and put this off to the side. And what they are is they have this little battery pack, and you have your settings on it over here. And if you turn these guys on, they light up. So it's just these string of lights. So what I'm going to do is I go ahead and string these into the straw, and when it comes down through, what I'll have to do is bend it over and then string it down another one, and it'll just be a continuous feed going all the way in through all the straws. So one of the reasons why I painted the straws black was that then you wouldn't have any illumination underneath the car itself, because the black is going to go ahead and block all the light from coming through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to climb underneath, and I'm going to go ahead and string these lights into our car. We're up underneath the layout, and what I've done is taken the lights, and I went ahead, this duct tape right here is holding them all together right there so they don't slip out. But what I did was run the wires in through these individual straws. And then when it comes out, it loops back around, it goes down the other straw and vice versa until it all comes out and goes to the control module. So now we have this hole right here. And what we need to do is dam this hole up so that when we do the resin pour, no resin comes out. So how I'm gonna do that is I'm just gonna go ahead and take some black duct tape and I'm just gonna duct tape this around, and that seal will help that resin from not coming out. And then when the resin pours, it'll get around these straws in here and then it will secure them and hold them into place. And that'll be our mount for those straws. So when we come back, let's get out from underneath the layout and we'll be working on our pond on the outside. Outside the layout now, got out from underneath it, and there's our car. So now let's go ahead and hit these lights and see what we got. So if we turn these guys on, look at that, we got headlights. That's pretty cool. So if we come up on top, see how our tail lights look. So you can see how our tail lights are all illuminated there. Now, one thing I did notice is down in here, I have a little bit of a gap. And if we look down inside, there is a little bit of light seepage on the back side there. Now, being that I use the string lights, there's lights throughout the whole entire strand. So make sure you get your straws well covered with black paint to not have that problem. But if you're just using the regular LEDs with the little bulb at the top, you're not going to have that issue. But in order to rectify this problem, what I have decided to do is to go ahead and I found some gravel. And this is same type of stuff we used on the stream. So what I'm going to do is take a couple of these pieces and work them in here in such a way and hot glue it in. And cool thing is they match up pretty good with our polystyrene. So like I say, if you can take a real stone and match it up to your modeled stone, you're doing pretty good. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and glue these into place down here, just to kind of, for one thing, get it up next to that tire, and then kind of block a little bit down inside there. And once we get done with that, we'll go on to the next step. Okay, let's see how we did. So I went ahead and I hot glued a couple stones right up here on the top, and that, you know, hey, they look good. So we got the car, so it's resting against something up here on top now. It's not hovering. And went ahead and put another one right over here. So it kind of looks like, you know, maybe they were sitting up on top and it knocked it down and wedged underneath. And we had a little bit of a gap. So I went ahead and took just a little bush, a little bit of moss, and put just a little bit of moss inside there, and that filled that gap up. So now we don't have any of that light illuminating from up underneath. So it makes our tail lights pronounce, you know, a lot more vibrant. So we go down here, everything looks good. We'll give it one last little look over, and we're getting really close to pouring some resin. So when we come back, I think it's about time that we go ahead and we build our dam across the front, and we start mixing up some resin. Okay, so next thing we need to do is go ahead and we need to build a dam up here on the edge. Now, what I've also done is put a little toothpick in here, and what that indicates, that is my height level. So I don't really want to go above that. So that's just a little indicator for myself. Now, also, what I've also done is go ahead and just laid a couple beads right now of hot glue just to go ahead and get started on where I need to put my dam at. So now I've got a little sheet of aluminum here, and why I'm using aluminum is A, it's pliable. I can move it around a little bit, shape it if I need to be, because the edge that I have here is not exactly all true. It's got a little bit of scenery on the edge. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and put this bead of hot glue down, and so we get there, I'm going to take this and I'm just going to go ahead and set it right up against. And just hold it into place, work it back and forth, and let that set up. And then once that sets up, I'm going to come in and do a little bit more sealing all the way across it, because I don't want this thing to be leaking on me when I do my resin pour. So I'm going to go ahead and work on this dam a little bit. We come back, it's time to start pouring some resin. Okay, now before we get started with our resin pour, I just want to go ahead and show you guys the stuff that I'm going to use. Now, this is the same material that I used on the stream that we did on a previous video. And you know, I'm really happy with this stuff, so we're going to push the envelope a little bit and see how it does on our pond. But it's this Park Super Glaze, and it comes in a 2-part, and each one of these is around 16 fluid ounces. So saying that, there was another thing that I had stated in the previous video, and that was to mix your color with water ahead of time so that you can figure out exactly the mixture that you want to do before you commit yourself to mixing your resin. So when we come back, let's go ahead and I'll take 16 ounces of water. So one of these is 16 ounces, and we're going to take 16 ounces of water and we're going to play with the color and come up with the color that we want. And I'll show you guys exactly how I do that. Let's figure out our color. So what I have here is just a little container of water, and this is just an iced tea that I drank, and the containers are 16 ounces of water. So, or they hold 16 ounces of fluid. So I went ahead and put water into this, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and figure out the color that we want based off of volume on the 16 ounces. Now, water and resin have a different viscosity, and if you noticed in the other clip, let's bring those back out, the A part is fairly clear. Now the B has a little bit of a tinge of a yellow to it, and we need to kind of keep that in consideration, but we can work this to our advantage because well, if we look at just regular water, water has a little bit of a tinge to it, so we can work this to our advantage. Keeping that in mind, let's go ahead and we'll figure out our mix. Now, I'm using food coloring, okay? And they do have resin tints on the market, but if you're kind of thinking, man, I don't want to buy all that tint just for resin and only do a small thing, if you raid your wife's cabinet, I'm sure that you might be able to find some food coloring. And if not, you can go up to the store and grab a little bit of food coloring. It's very, very inexpensive. Nice thing about food coloring, it is a dye. So in the dye itself will go into your fluid, and it won't be grainy or anything else. It'll actually blend real nicely in fluid. So the two colors that I'm going to use are the green and the blue. Now, these are a concentrate, so they go a long ways. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and start with a little bit of blue, and I'm only going to put 2 drops in it. 1, 2, and look how much that changes. Just with 2 little drops, you can see how it's already breaking down inside of it. So if I take this and I stir it around, you know, it just turned that blue real quick. So now also thinking this is just going to be 1 part. So when you do add the other portion of it, it is going to dilute this out a little bit. Now, being that it's so blue, I want to go ahead and just darken it down a little bit and kill some of that blue out and give a little bit of a green tinge. So if I just go 1 drop, we'll see how this goes. Now if we go ahead and mix this, that's going to give us kind of that aqua color, okay?
And you can see it's not all the way mixed. It's still sitting up on top. If you look at this, you can see it's a little bit darker of a green up on top than it is down below. So let's just go ahead and mix this up a little bit more. And there we go. Now, that looks pretty good. Let's just see what happens if we hit it with a little bit more green. One more drop. Put that over there. Let's hit this a little bit. You can really see how it's starting to go in there now. Now we don't want to make this too dark because we have all that scenery that we put down at the bottom. Now, I think what I'm going to do for our pond is I'm not going to go that deep with it. I'm actually going to bring it back a little bit. So I'm going to pour this out, and we're going to tint this one more time and see what we come up with. I went ahead and kept this around for comparison. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to go 1 drop of green, 1 drop of blue, and just see how our color looks. So 1 drop of blue, and let's go 1 drop of green. Okay, let's go ahead and stir this together. Make sure it all mixes well. You can see the top, how it's still a little bit green, so we'll keep on mixing this, make sure it all goes together. And there we go. Now, you can see how this is a little bit lighter than what it is over on our first mix. I want to go ahead and keep it a little bit on the light side because we have all that scenery and stuff in the inside of our pond area that we want to be able to see. And I think if we went with a little bit too dark, it's just going to hide a little bit more. I want to be able to see a little bit more of the detail. Now, in the stream area, this worked great for the mere fact that our thickness isn't that thick and we can see down through it. Now, being that our pour for the pond is going to be about 5 inches thick and the same as far as our depth, I want to go with a little bit lighter. Now, understand too that once we mix these together and the other side is clear or has that little bit yellowish tone, what it's going to do, it's going to go ahead and dirty this water a little bit. Plus, it'll dissipate it a little bit as far as our green. The greenness in the water. It'll just kind of dissipate that a little bit. So our color is going to be about right where I'm going to want it. So you can see how this works out pretty good. If you go ahead and play around with your colors ahead of time, before you start committing yourself to actually mixing your resin, it's just kind of a safety precaution. Resin isn't cheap. So, water comes out of the tap, so we can go ahead and play around with water to kind of get the idea of where we want our color at before we start committing it to resin. So next step is let's go ahead and let's get our resin mixed and let's start this pour process. Now let's go ahead and let's mix up our resin. Now it's 2-part, part A, part B. Part A is just your resin, part B is your activator or your hardener. We're not going to go ahead and tint the activator. We're going to set the activator off to the side and we're just going to concentrate on our resin. Reason behind that? Well, if you can see, the resin itself is clear. Activator has a little bit of a tinge to it. I just want to go ahead and keep these separate and also mix our clear because it's going to represent the way that we mixed our water. And we'll be able to tell as far as how our color is. Now, if we go ahead and set this off to the side, and we have our resin. Now, on a pour like this, for like a pond or anything we're doing a deep pour, we can't do it all at one time. Now, there are resins out there that they say they can go ahead and do huge deep pours. The problem is that as your resin starts to activate, okay, it will generate heat. And that heat can actually get hot enough that your polystyrene and the other things that you have in there that have a low melting point can actually get distorted with the heat that is generated through the chemical reaction of your resin. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this in multiple pours. Now, I see a lot of guys go out there and they mix some and do a pour, and then they come back and they mix some more and they do a pour. Well, that's great, but if your mix isn't precise, you're going to end up with different colors as you're pouring this all the way through. And that's, you might be going after that, but if that bothers you, then it's wise to go ahead and mix all of your color at one time. Now, I've seen also, to go ahead and figure that out, people have taken sand, or they've taken different types of material to go ahead and put in the area that they're going to go ahead and pour, to get that all figured out as far as exactly how much that they're going to need. Now, you could do that. I would recommend doing that before you do any of your serious scenery. So right after, per se, that we put the joint compound into the area, you could go ahead and close that all up and then figure out how much volume that you have inside there. I personally don't do it that way. I kind of come from the adage of the the painting as far as vehicles and stuff go, that I'd rather have a little bit more than not enough. And I don't want to be right there on the razor's edge, from the mere fact that if I'm going to screw up a little bit, I like to have a little extra material on the side that is kind of a cushion for myself, that I can correct the problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mix this up the same way that we mixed up our water. And go ahead and open this, and it looks like we have a little bit of a foil up here on top. So I'll just go ahead and take a trusty pocket knife and we'll get that out of the way. Set that down. Now what we want to do is go ahead and mimic our mix. So we had 1 part blue and 1 part green. So I'm just going to go 1 drop, okay, and 1 drop. All right, so now what this is going to do is we're going to mix this all the way up. We're not going to mix them together yet. We're just going to go ahead and mix this one side, get it all the way, the color all inside of it, and then we have this set, okay? We can go ahead and do multiple pours and our color is set, okay? We don't have to worry about trying to match our color between pours. So in order to do this, I need to go ahead, and I have a long, dowel here, and we're just gonna go ahead and mix this all up. And this is gonna take a while, because obviously the viscosity of your resin is different than that of water. So you're going to be stirring this for probably a good, whoa, we're dripping, a good 5 or maybe even 10 minutes. So let me get that and we'll come back. I went ahead and cleaned up my mess, and I'm just going to keep on mixing this. So I'm going to mix this for probably 5 or 10 minutes, just until that color gets all the way in there. And when we come back, we can start mixing some resin together. Right, so now we have it all mixed up. You can see as the color of this that it's all nice and uniform in there. It took me about 10 to 15 minutes to go ahead and mix it all, because I did mix it in this. Now you can pour it out, mix it on the side, but I decided to go ahead and keep it in this so that I can store it if I don't use it all, so it still has the lid. Now, in my last video, I went ahead and I had some mixing cups that I mixed everything in. This time I'm going to change it up a little bit. Now, these are just plastic containers that the iced tea that I drink comes in. And the cool thing about them is that they are uniform as far as the marks that they have on the side. There's little indentations in the plastic. So what I'm doing is utilizing these to go ahead and create my lines. So it makes a makeshift measuring cup. And since each one is the same, then we know that we're going to have equal parts as far as our activator and our resin. So again, with this, I went ahead and labeled them as well, so that when I do multiple pours, I can still use these containers as long as I keep them separated. So I have my part A for my resin and my part B for my activator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mix these two up, and then I'm going to let it stand for a little while so that it kind of gets some of the air bubbles out. They'll float to the surface, and then I'll go ahead and put them into a larger container that'll mix the two together. Again, let it stand a little bit, and then we can go ahead and commence the pour on our pond. So when we come back, I'll have everything mixed up, and we'll start our resin pour on our pond. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead and pour. Now, I went ahead and mixed those two together and let it stand for a while, and you can see that the color gives us kind of that murkiness. Not too bad though. With the compensation of that yellow, it really gives us a good watercolor as far as what you would find in a freshwater pond or lake. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and just ease this down. I'm going to pick an area where I don't have any of the scenery as far as our plants or anything. So I'm going to try to go ahead and pour on some of these open areas that I have in here and just kind of slowly let it do its thing. And we don't want to get too overzealous with it. We just want to go ahead and let it work its way down. And it'll go ahead and level itself because we have that wonderful thing called gravity that'll pull down on this. So let's just go ahead and do that. It kind of work itself around. Come up over the top over here. Oop, got on top of that, but we'll go back in that corner right there. Let it just kind of work its way around here. And remember, we're doing this in multiple pours, so kind of let it go. So I'm going to keep on going here, and come back. We'll see how it's looking. So I have that first pour all in, and you can see there's a little bit of air bubbles that are coming up here. Now, best way to take care of those is to just go ahead and just breathe down on it. So, and what that'll do is just go ahead and pop them off. So just kind of let it settle a little bit, let it kind of work its way up, and then just kind of use some heat as far as out of your breath, and you can go ahead and take care of those. Now, some of the scenery that's down in there, if you see something that's starting to collapse or something like that, you can go ahead and take a little rod or, toothpick, and just go ahead and come in here and just kind of lift it up a little bit, bring it back to life a little bit. So just come in here and give it a little bit of a fluff, because that resin might have just kind of weighted it down a little bit. So you can come in and just kind of do some last little minute adjustments on this stuff. And yeah, it's coming together pretty good. So we'll let this go ahead and sit. And those air bubbles, I'll keep on blowing on them. And we'll get ready for the second pour. Okay, so we're back. Now, if you notice on the outside, I have a piece of MDF right here. Now, the reason is because this bottom corner started to leak resin as it started to fill up. So I needed to shore that up and secure my dam. So I just went ahead and screwed in
a piece of MDF just to hold that corner into place. Sometimes that happens when you're doing a pour. So you always want to be prepared that if it does start to fail, that you have a fail safe that you can go ahead and secure that. Now, if we look inside, you notice that I have a driver that I added. Now, the first pour is done and it's hard. And what I've done is just went ahead and put him in and then glued him right down here on the corner. The little stick right here is just to go ahead and stabilize him while he dries. Now, on that first pour, you know, it's looking all right, but on that first pour, it went in a little bit deep and it started to have a little bit of a reaction. Now, with that, there's a little bit of bubbling that's down inside that I wasn't able to get out. And that's part of my fault as far as just getting a little anxious and putting in a little too much resin at one time. With this, it isn't going to be that big of a deal for the mere fact that we do have this waterfall that's going to be spilling off over here, and those bubbles and whatnot are down in there will just kind of go right along with the idea of a waterfall, you know, as far as turning up the water and whatnot. So that I'm not too worried about. I can make that work, but on the other side of it, it's starting to look all right. So you can see our bushes in there and our little guy, and we have still one fish that we still need to get more resin in there, so he's swimming around. But there we go. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a couple more pours, and when we come back, I think it'll be about time to take this dam off and see what we got. All right, so it took multiple pours, but we got it all up. So now what we need to do, since it's all hardened, is just go ahead and let's peel off the side somehow. So let's see here. And there we go. We got ourselves our pond. So let's check and let's see what our lights look like. All right, so went ahead and peeled that off. It has a little bit of blemish on this one side, but that's no problem. We can take care of that with a little bit of sanding and some polishing. We need to test and see how our lights look. So I have my control panel here, and let me go ahead and turn on our lights. And now let me kill this light. So let's check this out. It looks pretty cool. So our headlights are all working, our tail lights are all working, and it just gives enough of illumination down there you can make out some stuff around. So yeah, pretty cool effect. Pretty cool addition to the layout. What we need to do, since we peeled this off, is that it's hanging over just a little bit, right? So we had a little bit of the spillage come down. Now what we need to do is just go ahead and take a razor knife, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut this back, and we're going to take off that extra little bit of resin that was here on the side. And this is just going to go ahead and clean it up for us a little bit. So I'm just going to put a cut in there and just slowly start working this resin off. You can see I pulled it back here. And now if it pulls off some of the paint, it's no problem. We can come in and just go ahead and touch that all up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and slice this through and just kind of follow this around and get this all trimmed up. When we come back, we'll have that done, and we'll just go ahead and touch it up, and it'll be ready to go. All right, so at this point, I went ahead and cut that all out around the edge. Now, when you pour, you're going to have a little bit of a lip around here, right on the top. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and take an X-Acto knife, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut this little portion off. It's just a lip that's right on that top edge. So we just want to go on down and just go ahead and try to get a nice cut. There we go. And just cut the edge of that lip right off. So we'll get that, and then I'll make a nice beveled on down. So I'll get that cut, and we come back, we'll address the rest. we went ahead and cut this on the edge. Now to go ahead and dress that up a little bit and to go ahead and sand on the surface just to smooth it up. So one of the reasons why I want to smooth it up is just so it's a little bit more brilliant. It might have a little bit of a haze on it from where we had our dam up against it. And so we just want to clean up the surface some. And then also where we cut right here, it has a real sharp edge. So what I want to do is just go ahead and round that lightly. So what I have is some 1200 grit wet sandpaper. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and work this on the edge. Now I'm not getting on the top of it. I'm just working the area that I cut, and then also right here on the lower edge. And all I'm doing is concentrating on just kind of rolling that down a little bit and making, you know, a nicer, not such as a sharpness to it, taking the sharpness out of it. So we're just going to go ahead and just hit it like that. And then on the surface down here, I'm going to take the same 1200 and just go ahead and just give it a quick sand. And what this will do is just kind of clear it up a little bit and give it a nice glassy look to it. Now, after I get done with the 1200, I'll then come over with some 1500, a little bit finer, and then hit it with this. And this will just make it a little bit easier to polish out once we go and start doing a hand polish on this. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep on working this. When we come back, we'll have it ready to go ahead and hand polish. At this point, I have everything sanded. And now what I need to do is go ahead and rub it out. So what I'm using is just some 3M rubbing compound. And you can pick this up at an auto parts store, or, you know, anywhere that you can pick up different type of compounds, polishing compounds. This has a little bit of grit in it. What's going to help is that when we go ahead and sand this, it'll take care of all the little sand scratches we put into it. Just takes a little bit of elbow grease. So what we're going to do is go ahead and hit this area right in here, and we'll just go ahead and apply some pressure and give it a good hand jive, and she starts to come alive for us. So, and this is a process you'll go back and forth with, but it really, it makes it look nice. It clears up the face of it so you can see down inside of it better, and comes up pretty good. So you can already see how it's making a difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hand rub this all out. When we come back, we'll go ahead and address this edge. We'll go ahead and dress that all up. So I'm going to finish the polishing and come back. We'll figure out the rest of this. Okay, so at this point, went ahead and polished it all out, and you can see how it cleared it all up. So what we want to do is go ahead and address this outer side now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take some solvent on a rag, and I'm going to wipe the edge. So we polish this whole entire thing, but I want to wipe this edge right through here, right where we have some of our polystyrene on the opposite side. And why I'm doing this is I don't want any wax underneath what I am about to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do this and just wipe here on the edge like so, just so we can get some adhesion. Otherwise you're not going to get very good adhesion. So now we have that. Now I'm going to go ahead and take some of that joint compound, what we covered everything with, and I'm just going to take some joint compound in a small brush, and what we're going to do is we're just going to create a little bit of texture right here on the edge. So we're going to load this up. Let me get this loaded up. Okay. What this is going to do is it's going to cover the edge of the resin, and what we're going to do is create a little bit of texture here, and we're going to paint this. We're going to paint it as far as our rock color that we have there, just here on the outside. And what this will do is it's doing a couple things. We're cleaning up the edge as far as where the resin is at. And then at the other side of it is it just kind of finishes it off, you know. You don't have just this edge of resin here. We've got something that blends. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep on doing this and just kind of dabbing it up. And as it starts to dry, we can come in and add a little bit of texture to it. So I'm just going to keep on working this over, and when we come back, hopefully it'll be all dry. So now it's dry. So what we need to do is come in and go ahead and paint it out. So what I'm going to do, if we go ahead and zoom in here, is that I'm going to go ahead and paint this up the same way that we painted our rocks. But obviously we're going to have to be a little bit more careful. So what I've got is I'm just going to go ahead and start with my gray wash, just like I do with the other stuff. And we're just going to take our time and make sure that we get it just so. So just, you know, take a break if you have to every once in a while, or you could get yourself a little Q-tip just in case you get some on the edge. You can come in and clean it off. But I'm going to take my time, go around here, get this all done up, and paint it up the same way that we did our rocks. And we come back, I think we'll be almost complete. Well, cool. There we go. So we got that all painted, it's highlighted, and it just looks a lot better. I mean, it's not that big edge or anything else, and it just kind of blends in with the rest of the whole entire scenery. So there we go. I think it's complete up to this point. So next video we're going to go ahead and do the waterfall. When we do that, we'll do the water effect and everything all across the top. So I think it's about time we wrap this bad boy up. So there we go. We got ourselves a pond. So let's go down. Let's take a look at it one last time and just see how it is. So, hey, looks pretty good. We got a guy swimming around. Got a crash car. It's all good. And we even got lights. So kind of a cool effect. So on the next video that we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and do the waterfall. When we do the waterfall, we'll finish off the effects on the top portion of this. And at the same time, we'll complete the scenery in this area. So there we go. Got another video down. So if you like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. And if you go over and you see that little thing called Facebook and you hit that, you can come on over to the page. It's Boone Slot Car Garage over on Facebook group, and you can share what you've got going. I can show you things that I'm working on, and it's kind of cool. Get a little community thing going on. So next time on Boone Slot Car Garage, we'll be back down here. We'll be playing with a waterfall. See you guys later.